That's how you do it. I just have to add it to the stream. Um, so there's been a lot of chatter in the various streams, actually probably for almost a year now, about playing Dungeons and Dragons. It comes up from time to time. There's a group that's going to be playing with Depths Unknown. I'm going to start a group up. So it looks like everything is just getting started. From what I've seen on the Fishcord site, everyone's talking about using the same tool. So I thought I'd go over that here. And then someone who might be interested, I know I've got a couple people who are interested who have never played before, but they've seen it on Stranger Things or they've seen it somewhere else. And so this will be a good time to kind of go over what some of those tools are, how to play, because some people are worried, okay, I don't know how to play this game. This one's actually very easy. Hey, Thunder. Um, so to get started with the tools, I'll just start with the tools, and then I'll go into how to play, because there are rules, but a lot of times, because someone is the game master, or in the case of Dungeons and Dragons, they're the dungeon master, that person is really there to help out. They're there to guide everyone. It's not an adversarial type of game like, oh, I'm going to win, or whatever. It's a team effort. Even the dungeon master is part of the team, because it's no fun if everyone dies. However, sometimes there's something called a TPK, or total party kill, that you might see referenced in Stranger Things or other places where, okay, everybody died, but it was just too hard in an instance, and so that's what happened. So this is my account. I play a few games. I play late Fridays with a group in California, but I'm in Texas, so I have a hard time waking up Saturday mornings because they start late. I created a campaign for Fish Fam. I'll pick a type of adventure to play, and then there's this one that I played. It just ended a year ago. It's in a world called Eberron, and that's the other thing about Dungeons and Dragons. It takes place in a world, in a setting, and the dungeon master sets up what these are. There's some very well-known published ones. I know it. And so there's one that I think came up on the Fish World called Forgotten Realms. That's the most popular one. Then Eberron is another one. In these worlds, magic exists, magical creatures exist. Most of the time, maybe one person in 100, one person 1,000 has some magic abilities. Eberron is one that I played and hosted a while back, where almost everyone can use magic, even the craftspeople who you might be doing your weaving or your healing or your blacksmith. They'll use a little bit of magic in what they do. So I'm going to just launch that really quick to kind of show what it looks like. It does play on a PC, so if you can't play on a PC, we can actually find a way to allow you to use your mobile device. Roll20 does have a mobile app, so if we need to, we can create a character for you here, and then you can use your mobile device to play, and so on. So this is kind of a game in motion. There's different maps. This is the old style when I was growing up in the 1970s and 80s and playing Dungeons and Dragons. You'd buy graph paper and you'd draw your maps on there, and then you'd set up a tabletop and you would use these miniatures. So I've got a miniature right here. So let's see if I can change the look. So basically, this is a little miniature of an archer that I've got. You would paint them, maybe put a little other scenery in place. And so whenever I started playing back in early 2020, my son got involved in the Stranger Things version of Dungeons and Dragons, really liked it. So we went to the game shop, played a couple sessions there, and then everything went on lockdown. And that's where we discovered things like Roll20 and how to play online like we're going to do in the FishTube, with several different campaigns running at the same time, different days. So Depths Unknown is a dungeon master for one group. I'm going to dungeon master another. And then other people have said they could dungeon master as well if there's enough interest. And normally you have maybe five or six, maybe even 7 people playing at once. That's kind of a good number to keep it playable. And you're not spending a lot of time with too many people. If you have too few people, it becomes a little harder because you've got too too few people interacting. If you get into trouble during the game. But so we used to play with these little miniatures, and then we would use, where did I put that? So like little dice pouch, I bought these a year ago, and the dice are all different sizes. So this one is a 12-sided die. They look kind of fancy. I just got them on Amazon. This is a 6-sided like you would see in Yahtzee or any typical board game. And then there's an 8-sided, a 4-sided, 10-sided. And actually, you can do two 10-sideds. One has multiples of 10, one has the units, and this becomes what they call percentile dice. You can roll to 100%. And then the most common one that you see, and why you see this software called Roll20, is because there's a 20-sided die. And this 20-sided die is what you would use. It's like you're making an attack or you're trying to see if you succeed at some skill check. And that's the other thing that happens is you may want to try something. Just think about it off the top of your head while you're playing is, hey, I'm going to try to climb this rope, or I'm going to try to push this person over and run away. And based on some factors, the dungeon master will say, okay, well, roll the 20. And based on your skill set, you get to add points to that or subtract. And there's a certain value you need to meet. Sometimes things are contested, like the dungeon master will roll and you will roll, and if you get the higher, then you succeed at what you wanted to do. So let me go back to that screen with the Roll20. So this was a map, and instead of miniatures, they have something called tokens. So this was a person who was playing. They had a token that they made, and let me do this right now. I'm going to send a link to Roll20, just so if you're in the stream, anyone watching the stream later who said, okay, let me check these things out, you can follow along on your own. And that way, you figure out if you want to play or not. Because some people, may be a little on the fence, but it's really easy. This is more about the conversation, and then the rolling of the dice actually happens in here too. So for example, let me go here. Everyone will have something called a character sheet. And I'm just going to pick this player's character sheet. And you go through a set of screens to create your character. They have all different skills. Like there's 6 different characteristics you have, like your strength, your dexterity, your charisma is like, are you that very easy to get along with person? Everyone just likes talking to you up front, or are you just that grump that nobody likes? So a high value is good, a low value is bad. And so like this character has, I don't know if you can see it up here, it says 8. That's his strength. And because it's lower than average, they get a -1 to anything they want to do for strength rolls. And if they're trying to arm wrestle someone and that they have a good strength, this person will get a -1 on their roll. The other person may get a plus on their roll because they have higher strength. So those 6 characteristics will help. And then there's different types of skills. It's a pool of standard skills that you have that you can determine whether you succeed or not. And that's what the dungeon master is going to do. They're going to say, hey, all right, so you want to know if you can find a key that's laying in the ground somewhere that got dropped. Maybe it's an investigation check. So there's this person gets a +6 because it's something they're good at. And they click on that skill. There's actually a chat window in Roll20, and it will roll. And it's giving me 2 values. So there's something called advantage and disadvantage where maybe you have to roll 2 dice. So it'll roll 2 automatically the way I have it set up. So basically you take the first one you saw, which is a 13. And so if I said, oh, okay, roll the dice and you need to succeed on a 10, then they succeeded in finding that key. If it was a 15, then maybe not. If they had advantage, which is some rules we'll go over during gameplay, then maybe you take the higher of the 2. If you're disadvantaged, like maybe you're exhausted, which is a condition that can happen, like you've been going all day, the dungeon master will say, okay, you have a point of exhaustion. At that point, everything is at disadvantage, and you would always get the lower of the 2 rolls. But anyway, this is their character sheet. They can do different things. Like if there's a weapon like a crossbow and they're shooting it, they can roll. And the first one is to hit. The second one is how much damage they do. So this is the first tool. There are maps in the tool. So this is one that I made myself. It gives you the ability to make these maps. You can also download different backgrounds, which is something I've done for this game. So um, since I'm the dungeon master, I can pick which map comes up. And these guys have been playing for a while, so you'll see there's some sort of undead champion here. So there was this bad guy that they had managed to defeat. And then so this is a top-down view of a village. And so I'll be the one setting this up. And Depths Unknown's game, he'll set up his maps and move everybody around. And if for some reason someone needs help, there's the ability, like I just did for that one character, for the dungeon master to step in and roll the character. But what will happen is during gameplay, you'll manage your own character. But if you need help, the dungeon master is always here to help and say, okay, what do you want to do? Oh, you want to see if you can pick up this very heavy box. Okay, make a strength roll, and you need to get at least a 12. And that way you can say, okay, now you picked it up. Now what do you want to do with it? There's all sorts of things you can do. The best way to play, if you haven't played before, is just think of that science fiction fantasy type environment, like under Lord of the Rings or some other environment, that type of person you want to be, like an elf or a dwarf or a human or some other magical creature that would normally be a character, and start from there. You can say, I want to use magic, or I want to be able to heal people. I want to be that person who hides in the shadows and can pick locks. And so based on that, we can work together during what's called a session 0, which is what I plan to have, where you get to figure out what you want to do as a team. Okay, someone wants to be a fighter, someone wants to be a magic user of some sort, like a wizard or a warlock, and so on. And then from there, we'll build up our characters, and then the next session we'll actually start the gameplay somewhere. So I've been thinking of playing in that region called the Forgotten Realms that was mentioned in Fishcord, in a city called Waterdeep. If Depths Unknown is playing the same campaign, I'll pick something else. Since they started first, I don't want to have the same campaign running, or the same adventure running in multiple campaigns, because it means you'll live stream Depths Unknown, see them playing, and then you'll come in and say, well, wait a minute, didn't we just see this last week, in his stream? So I'll pick something different if that's the case. So this is, there's another alternative that was talked about called D&D Beyond, which is now owned by the people who make D&D, or Dungeons and Dragons. And that's another system where you can create your characters, and something called Beyond 20, get a third thing. It's a plugin. So let me go to that. So this is a plugin called Beyond 20. You can install it in Chrome, or you can install it in the Firefox. I don't know if it runs anywhere else. I don't think it does. But this is a plugin which, if you have your Roll20 screen, which is what I have here, or there's several other systems where you can do something similar to this, it will let you use your D&D Beyond, which is, I don't know, that's it. This is the D&D Beyond page. And in D&D Beyond, you can roll your character. You can actually set up a campaign and share things with the people playing through D&D Beyond, which is what I'm going to do. I think Jason's going to do it as well. And let me post this. So this is the D&D Beyond. Is this screen, and then for Beyond 20, if you're playing in Chrome or Firefox, you can use that to link the two together. And I'll put that in there too. And you don't need to use that if you're using just Roll20. You don't need D&D Beyond. If you feel more comfortable using D&D Beyond, you can. But all of the rules are here. So when I add someone to a campaign, they can see the basic player's handbook. So this player's handbook here is what everyone used to get in the game store. And change the screen here. So you might have seen these books in game stores or online. So that's the player's handbook. This one book has all of the rules you would need to play. However, if you don't want to read it, you don't have to. We'll walk everyone through it. But if you do want to buy a book like this, you can get it on Amazon. But just like with fish keeping, find your local store. If there's a game store, it's owned by some local people who are struggling probably because of everything that's happened in recent years. And if you buy it from them, you'll be helping them out. There's a lot of other books, but you don't need those at all unless you really get serious into it and you want to get those books. Um, so anyway, there's the different books here that are available under sources, under game rules. If when you do have access, if you decide I'm playing a bard, someone who can use magic and inspire the team, you can come here and click on everything you want to know about a bard, and it'll bring up the rules directly. You can also search for things. So if I use a term in the game and afterwards you're like, I really want to know what that was, even when we're not playing, if we're still running the campaign, you can come to D&D Beyond and search for it. So every type of character you play, this is a bard. It'll have all the information about them. Plus, as characters advance, they go through levels like in any gaming system. The maximum level is 20. You start at 1. And in this case, this person can cast certain spells. So it has a table of how many spells you will learn, of what type, and so on. And we'll get into that in more detail during the character creation. But there are certain things about the character, like you have a certain amount of health. Those are called hit points. Those are listed in how you generate them for each character. And the things you're proficient in. So, for example, you might see in people in heavy armor all the time. Well, not everyone can wear heavy armor. In this case, a bard is only proficient in light armor, so it's like a very light leather armor maybe, or something similar to that. And then very simple weapons. They can use certain weapons, but not everything under the sun like a fighter would. A fighter you can think of as someone who's fought in an army or been training day in day out to gain those skills, and they can use almost every single type of weapon and armor, versus someone like a bard who just uses simple things they can quickly pick up and use. And so those are the ones they can use very well. But they also can use musical instruments and use those. But it'll show you everything about them, how to cast spells, and we'll get into them a little later about those spells and abilities. But one of the things that I will do for the campaign is send those people who are playing a link. And so let me go under collection. So I have something called a campaign. I've actually got a higher end subscription. You can do a free subscription to this. And that's, if you're going to play, do the free subscription to D&D Beyond. You can at least see the very basic rules. And I'm going to put a link to that in as well. So sign up for D&D Beyond. And the basic rules, it's not the player's handbook I just showed. It's a subset of that, but it's kind of meant for people who just want to dive in, maybe get the very, very minimal. Let me paste it again because it merged everything. Oh no, that's just the way I pulled it. Sorry about that, folks. Just so you get a hyperlink. Anyway, you can create a free account. And then what I can do is I can run different campaigns. So I created one called Fish Fam right here. I haven't added anyone yet afterwards. I will send a link to the people who have already said they want to play. If they change their mind, I can take them off. But as people come in, I'll add them here, and they'll immediately have access to D&D Beyond and all the sources that I have access to. I don't have access to all of them. I have access to maybe 90% of them because I signed up for a package deal, and then as new books came out, I paid a little extra to add those along. And so I can add people here, and I've added content sharing. So that means that you can see everything that I could see. And then I started creating a character right away. One thing that you will notice is that in Roll20, and I just shifted screens to Roll20. I'm going to bring up the map. You're not going to worry about this screen. This is what the Dungeon Master will use, because I can say, look, here's the players, and I can move them from one map to another. It'll change which map you're on your screen, but you're not going to see anything that I do. So I'm going to go back to this forest road, and we had all of these little tokens. It'll take a little while to redraw, but so there's different characters. on these tokens. To build the token, if you have artwork that you have or you know of some artwork you can use, a lot of people just download something from the internet. I've actually commissioned one for a character that I have. So this is my character. This little, looks like it's actually a cat. It looks a little like a rat. But there's a race of people called Tabaxi. They're like cats. If anyone has seen Simply Beta, Taylor mentioned once or twice in some of her streams that when she plays D&D, her preference is a Tabaxi. She actually has another channel about with the name Tabaxi in it. But it's like a cat, and they have different skills. They have claws, so they can attack with the claws, or they can climb very well. So there's things that we'll go over as we go into character building, what people want to play. But I commissioned some artwork from a friend of mine who's playing this other one. I'm paying her, I think, $35, I think. She's going to give me this scene, and then I'm going to replace this one with this custom one with my actual character. It's going to look less like a rat. But in order to make the tokens, there's another program. It's called, there's many programs out there, but this one's called Token Stamp. And so this is my little set of streams I've done. Just going to pick a little fish out, and you take your artwork, you drag and drop it into this screen, and now I can say, well, I want a border. So there's a little border at the top. I'm going to pick this colorful one. The fish doesn't fit, but I can take my little image and I can drag it till it's the right size. I can change the background color. I want it maybe that color. And when I'm done, I click the download button, and it downloads what's shown in this picture right here. The little checkerboards are basically transparent. So basically anywhere I take this token on the board, let's see where it is. It will upload it into Roll20, and I resize it. There's some things I'll do in the background, but I will basically, this will be the token. So, you know, who knows, maybe you'll come across a giant discus somewhere in the water. But that was quick and easy. It's something that you can do, in which case you can just send me in Discord or some other method, whatever token you want to use. Or if you want me to do it, just let me know what you're thinking, and I can do that as well. So that's how to create those tokens. Let me do this. I will change the campaign. Actually, wait, let me do something else first. So I was talking about D&D Beyond here. I'm going to go back into this other campaign, and I had all these characters who were playing. So there's that Vincent. And so this is bringing up his character sheet. So it looks similar to the other one in Roll20. The good thing about using it in D&D Beyond is if you're playing, let's say you play a campaign with me here, you make it to level 5, and then a friend of yours says, hey, I heard you're playing D&D, but I'm using Foundry, not Roll20. Well, you can still use this character because Foundry also uses that Beyond 20, and you can go and roll here, and it'll show up in the Foundry program that they're using instead of Roll20. But the character stats are here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little more. It's a little bit different, but let's say that somewhere along the way there's a say it's a crossbow. So there's a crossbow. These are actions that they can take. There's spells, other things in inventory, and other things. But generally, you leave this action screen up because if you're playing, you can just hit this roll to hit. And if you're using Beyond 20, which is that plugin that we talked about that lets you use D&D Beyond to use in other games, when you see this B on the 20-sided die, that means that what you click there will roll a die in whatever you're running on. So I'm going to run and click that. It also brought this image up, but if I come here, this is now my Roll20 screen, but if you look, Vincent rolled a 14 on his light crossbow. So you're in two different programs on the same computer. you're able to use the character sheet in your D&D Beyond, and then it shows up here in Roll20. So you can pick and choose, and you don't have to choose right away. Let me go through how to create a character, since there'll be some choices to make, and I'm going to show you in Roll20 first, and then I can jump over into D&D Beyond and do something similar. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of this game, and I'll go back. I'll launch this PhishFam campaign. I might have to recreate this because what I'm going to do is whatever campaign we play, I'm actually just going to buy the pack that has everything preloaded, and then I can share things with the team. So I have a blank sheet. There's something called a journal, which is a tab, and we'll go over this when we start, so that I don't expect everyone to know how to do everything on day one. But I can create a character sheet. There's options to upload all the artwork. If you have a token, you can pick one on screen and say, I want to use this token for my token, and so on. And then so I can just make random character and save it. And it does, I can take an advanced approach and edit the sheet directly by whatever means I want. But in Roll20, the best thing to do is use something called a Charactermancer. It's a wizard that lets you go page by page and say, oh, what do you want to do here? What do you want to do here? And it'll guide you through the whole process of creating a character. When I create the characters for your encounters, I'll use what's called an NPC or non-player character. That's that middle option. So for me, I'll use that, and I'll just quickly put together these characters and graphics of the things that you're going to encounter during the game. But the gameplay is going to be basically just the conversation. So, and at some point, if you have to take certain actions in sequence where you have to go into combat, it breaks into turns, and those turns are about 6 seconds long, but it'll be pretty easy. So this is what's called the Charactermancer. And up at the top, you'll see these little buttons. You can jump back and forth to these different things that we're going to pick until you get to the end when you say, okay, that's what I want. If we do in the session 0, when we create a character for you and you say, you know what, maybe I want to do something different, no problem. We'll just come in and redo that before we actually start the first session. So the first thing it's going to say is, what race are you? And I've got a lot of other books loaded in here, so you're going to see a lot of information beyond the basic books. You can see there's the tabaxi in there that I talked about before. There's something called a Triton, which is a type of, it's a humanoid race that lives underwater. But let's say, just to be something people might be familiar with, I'll pick a half-elf. And so there are 6 different character ability scores that we talked about, like your strength, your charisma. And a half-elf tends to be one of those people that people tend to be drawn to. They're like, so they get an advantage. They get a +2 automatically. And they can pick 2 others that they want to increase by 1 point. This gives them a little more flexibility. Some races do it a little differently. But what I'll do is, maybe I want to be an archer. So archers like dexterity. Dexterity is what you use to improve your ability to hit with the bow. And then maybe I want to be able to detect things a little better. So if I walk into a strange area, something might stand out. That's called using your perception. And so that's driven by your wisdom ability. And I'll walk through those as we go through this. But wisdom is something you want if you want to pick things out suddenly. Some of you are going to get a treat. The fish feeder just went on, so everyone's running like piranha to get fed. If you're searching for something like the key that's lost in the dirt somewhere, that's a more focused search. So instead of perception, you call it an investigation, and that uses intelligence. So we'll go through that. Also, certain types of characters need better scores in certain areas to be better at what they do. Alignment is something that You're good, you're evil, you're in between. There's something called lawful, like you always do everything by the book. Then there's chaotic, like, I'm just gonna do whatever I feel like. So they break those down into those characteristics. Um, for the most part, most people who play D&D, you're not allowed to pick an evil character unless the DM specifically says that. There are some famous people who play D&D who love to do that, like Joe Manganiello is his name. I guess he's in Magic Mike and True Blood and things, but he's very famous in the D&D community. His character has actually been written into the D&D world as Archon the Cruel, I think his name is. So there's exceptions, but generally, if you don't know what you want, you can be just straight neutral. I don't know what I am. I'm just, I do whatever I want, or you can be on the good side, yeah, maybe here or there. So neutral good is always a good one if you just don't know where you are as far as, in the good side. Are you a by the book person? Or are you kind of a free spirit type? So the creature type, there are certain magic spells that work differently on different types of things. So you're a humanoid. Size, like if you were a dwarf or a halfling, like if you are familiar with Lord of the Rings, a halfling is a hobbit. They just don't call them hobbits. I don't know if it was a trademark thing. So they would be small rather than medium. And then speed is how many feet you can move in a turn, which is 6 seconds. The smaller characters may only move 25 feet. Some of the larger ones might move 40. And as some of these characters get better, they might actually increase their speed over time. Like there's a character class called a monk, which is like the kung fu style martial arts monk. Their speed will increase as they go up in skill set. Skill proficiencies, I'll go a little faster. Like athletics, if you're doing a contested strength with someone, like you're arm wrestling, you use athletics. So maybe acrobatics is the dexterity variety of that. You're going to try to walk across a narrow plank. Maybe you need to do an acrobatics check to see if you can make it across okay. Sleight of hand, I'll pick that. That's like if you're going to pick someone's pocket, or you're playing 3-card Monty, how well you're going to do. But also maybe, are you going to pick a lock? And then intimidation is an interesting one. So when you encounter other characters, as the dungeon master, I'll be controlling their actions, decisions based on what you do or say. And so if you want to convince them, hey, you need to let me buy this door, I need to go here, you can try to persuade them, say, I really need to go there, I'm a good guy, I'm not going to do anything wrong. Okay, that's a persuasion. If you're going to say, you know what, I need to be in there, and if you stop me, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows you're the one who did it. Intimidation is that characteristic. So I'm going to pick intimidation. And then you might run across people who speak different languages. Since I'm half Elven, I can speak Elvish. Or Common is just the common language. So we're all speaking English. You can think of that as like English. But I get to pick one more. And there's others out there. So interestingly, dragons have a language. So you can speak Draconic. There are other character classes that speak Draconic. And we can go over all those others during character creation. One feature that some races have and others don't is called dark vision. It's the ability to see in the dark. Maybe you see gray instead of color, and you can see a certain distance in pitch black. But if you're human, you can't see in the dark. And there's other races that can't see in the dark. And so you may want to have that ability, in which case you should pick a race that can see in the dark. I made the mistake of not doing that in my first time playing when I came back to D&D, and half the game was in the dark, and everyone wanted to keep the torches off so they weren't discovered. So Fey ancestry, there'll be other characteristics based on your race, which will be important for gameplay and other things. Fey ancestry means you kind of have like a fairy background. I mean, that's what elves are. They kind of have this magical background. They can't be charmed, or they have advantage against being charmed. But also, if someone tries to put them to sleep using a magic spell, it's not going to work. They actually don't sleep. They go into, they do some sort of meditation every night. So I finished the race. I'm going to go to class. And this is where maybe I'll pick a ranger. So it used to be in D&D, you had fighters, and then you had subclasses of fighters like called paladins, which is a holy warrior, or a ranger, which is like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. And so I'll pick a ranger. And so I want to be able to use my bow. And let's see, I get to pick other things. So animal handling. So if I'm a ranger, I may want to be able to interact with animals better. This could be like you come across a horse cart and you need to convince the horse to move. Well, you'll make an animal handling check. Is can you work with that animal? You may run across a wild animal, like I want to let it know I'm friendly. Maybe that's an animal handling check. I'll do investigation. And nature would be a good one if I'm going to be a ranger, because if I'm outdoors, I want to know, is that plant poisonous or not? I can go forage. And I might want to make other nature checks. Does that look right to me? They also have something called a favored enemy. I'm not going to dive into everything, but let me go a little bit by little bit. So here I can say, well, maybe because I'm a ranger, I'm used to working in areas where giants are terrorizing villages. So that's my favorite enemy. I'm going to get certain advantages as a ranger fighting those. It's specifically a ranger thing. It's not available everywhere. And I also get to pick an extra language. And it's for that favorite enemy. So I can understand what they wrote. If they wrote something, if I hear them talking around a corner, I know what they're saying and things like that. And then there are certain types of equipment you get. Oh, certain types of environments. So let's say, I'm going to say mountain, or not grassland, mountain. Just another ranger thing about when you're exploring in a certain area, I'm familiar with a certain type of environment. And then equipment, there's a standard equipment set that I get. I get a longbow, arrows. And when I play, so the standard set is if you have a crossbow, you get 20 crossbow bolts. If it's a bow, you get 20 arrows. We're not going to count the ammunition in this game, trying to make it as simple as possible. Some dungeon masters, you want to be as realistic as possible. They may count everything. Plus for spells, oh, well, you're going to need these ingredients to cast that spell. Do you have them? And sometimes it's a diamond or some other precious gem of a certain value that you need, in which case you should have bought that at some point in order to cast a spell. And when you do, it's consumed. We're not going to do that either. So if you want to cast a spell, you can cast it within the guidelines. It says like you can cast it during a turn, or maybe it takes 10 minutes to cast. So we're just not going to worry about ingredients or the ammunition to keep it simple. And then, so I'll pick scale. Mail and leather are very comparable. Scale is a little more heavier, but I'm going to pick a leather armor because that's what someone out in the woods would probably wear. It's lighter. And if I have better dexterity, it's a type of armor that lets me use that skill to increase the protectiveness of the armor. Some armor is just a flat. Others, you can add your dexterity bonus if you have a dexterity bonus. And that bonus comes, I think, when you're above 10 out of 18. That's, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me keep going. So that's your class. Next. And then you have abilities. So in Roll20 or D&D Beyond, actually these are standards within D&D. In order to kind of make it as fair as possible, you can do one of two things. You can actually roll for your statistics, in which case it's all random. You could do really poorly, you could do really well. Sometimes I'll let people roll for stats. If it's really bad, it's like, okay, you're just going to use something called like a standard array or a point buy. And what that means is for standard array or point buy, you've got a pool of certain numbers. You just decide where you're going to put them. I'm going to put this one on strength, this one on constitution. And then that way, everyone's about average. You've got really good skills, you've got some poor skills, and nothing's really, really bad. But some people will like to do the rolls, and if they got a really bad score, they live with it. If they have a very low intelligence score, I mean, I've seen, there's anyone who watches Critical Role where they play Dungeons and Dragons, one of the characters doesn't read, and he makes a point of it. And at some point in the campaign, he wants to try to learn to read because his intelligence was so low. He focused on his strength. and other abilities. So I'm going to pick the standard array since that's very unusual. And for each of these, it's like a checkbox. So I want my dexterity to be high, so I'm going to pick that. I might pick perception next, or wisdom, because I want to be able to perceive things, I believe. Also, certain classes use different skill abilities for their spell bonus. I think it's wisdom. If not, I can always go back later and change it. Constitution is your health. So you're going to have more health, more hit points if you have a higher constitution. Plus, if you encounter poison or any other substances, you have a better chance of not being impacted by it because you'll have a dice roll against your constitution to make sure that you're not impacted by something. And as you can see, I'm going from highest to lowest. And Ranger may need strength, charisma, and intelligence. I'm below average. There's always one below average score. The 10 is average. So I think that's how I'll do it. But after I pick this, it's going to, up at the top, it'll tell me some things about my character. You know, what do they have? It also gives suggested abilities. This is based on the class that I picked of Ranger. So dexterity or strength, and then wisdom. And I picked wisdom and dexterity. Hit points. What it did there is every class has a maximum, and at first level they give you the maximum. Afterwards, there's a way you can pick. You can either roll it, which I don't recommend because you could roll a 1 on the die. You know, you're rolling dice. Different size die depending on the type of character. But there's one method where you basically pick a very specific value. It's just 1 above the median for that dice type, and that's generally what I recommend. And what we'll do here is we'll just use that because it keeps people from staying weak, you know, by accident just because of their dice roll. There's something called the background. It's like, well, when you grew up, how did you grow up where you are? For this type of character, I pick Outlander because you're out in the woods. But if you grew up in a city environment, maybe you grew up, you know, out in the streets. There's one called Urchin. I've picked that before when I'm a roguish type character living in a city. And you get advantages in that city. So if you grew up in Waterdeep, which is where I'm planning to set this adventure, and you pick Urchin, if you need to find your way to the port, you know how to get there better than anyone and how to do it sneakily and maybe quicker than everyone else. So you know all the shortcuts in the city, for example. But there's a lot of different things. We'll go over that during character creation. But I'm just going to pick Outlander because it's something I'm familiar with. It gives certain skill proficiencies, each one of them does. And then you can pick, usually almost every character type, you get to pick a type of musical instrument. And then sometimes you actually get yet another language. So there are characters who actually know 3 or 4 languages based on what they picked. I'm going to pick Goblin for the next one. And, you know, this is a characteristic of the Outlander type. I'm a wanderer. I have an excellent memory for maps and geography. And then I can even, let's say I was an outcast. So the reason I was an Outlander, I was outcast from. And then there's personality traits. We don't have to do these, but it's something that if you read these and say, you know what, that's a good background. If you pick these types of personality traits that are driven by your background, maybe it will influence the decisions you make. So you want to play your character type, in which case, you know, hey, maybe I like being around animals. That's what led me out in the woods. Which means, you know, if I have a choice between I'm going to hang out with the caged animals, you know, I'm going to see if they're okay rather than going to the pub with everyone else, that type of thing. You know, have a lesson for every situation. I'm just picking these at random. You can actually randomize them too. I'm just going to pick these quickly. You know, I'm an honorable person. family, tribe's most important. And then there's the flaw. This is another thing that helps with the character development if you want to have this, is I'm a little slow at trusting people. And then you get certain special equipment, like a hunting trap, other things that, because of what I picked as my background. Equipment. So everyone's going to start out, you're going to be wearing some sort of armor, you're going to have some money in your pocket, and you're going to have certain things that you would normally have just from living life. And so in D&D, there's two ways to do it. One is based on your class, you start with just some standard equipment that you would normally have, or you start with a pool of money and you buy the things that you want. And that becomes a little more complicated. You need to know what there is to buy and what you really want. So I'm just going to pick the class equipment, in which case I'll pick my leather armor, which I talked about before. Actually, let me see. Does this do this? Sometimes what it'll do under the drop downs, it'll tell you about it. But so scale mail, it's like scales and set into something like, I think it might be like chainmail. Tends to be heavier and it's noisier, from what I understand. I'll have to double check. I'll pick leather armor. It's my standard for something, a starting character. And then short sword. I already have the longbow, so I don't need a longbow. And then maybe, what else I might have? Yeah, maybe I'll have a spear. Living outdoors. Dungeoneer's pack or Explorer's pack. If you're in a city, you probably don't need a Dungeoneer's pack. Or actually, maybe you do. If you're out in the wilderness, Explorer's pack makes more sense. Just because of my character type, I'm just going to pick Explorer's pack. They have similar things in there, although like a Dungeoneer's pack might have more torches or things that you would use in an underground environment. And then I'll go to the next one, spells. So some character classes are spell users. If you can't figure out what you want to do, Warlock is always an easy one because it's a balance of being able to fight or cast spells. And believe it or not, a lot of people pick Warlock at some point because they do have some interesting skills. And it doesn't mean they're bad. It's just that's the name of the character class. And so there's nothing here for me to pick, so I'm going to move on. There's something called feats. So what happens in most of these characters, every time you move up a level, every 4 levels for most character types, you get to increase ability scores. You get 2 points to add. So I could add like 2 points to my dexterity and I'll be better at using my bow. Or I could add 1 point to my wisdom and 1 to my constitution. I'll be a little healthier and also be able to pick things out, with my perception a little better, or a better spellcaster. So these are things you would normally get every 4 levels. But you could also choose a feat instead. And one feat that I like is something called Sharpshooter, which gives some extra advantages I can use when using a bow. And so it's kind of a toss-up. Which one do I pick at that 4th level? The one difference is the fighter class, after 4th level, they get one at 6 and 8 as well, because they get to pick a lot of different types of feats if they need to. They're just there's a lot more to it. So most people think, oh yeah, they're just a fighter, they just carry weapons. Well, that's how D&D balances out that character type, is maybe they don't have magic, but at least they become more well-rounded in the things they use, which are the weapons and other things. So there's nothing for me to do here on feats, and I'll explain feats when we get to that. And I'm not going to fill in anything, but you can do your age, height, weight for your character. And then it gives you your summary, and you can apply the changes. And if we need to go back, we can. There are also ways that if you're playing this a lot, you can actually export this character into something called a vault. If you're really into it, we can do that later. You can put information about your background. Oh, that's more advanced. I don't want to go there. So we'll just stay with the character sheet. But it describes everything about your character in the character sheet. If you need to do something like, let me change this to the chat window. The chat window displays everything you do. So if I make an animal handling check, I just click this animal handling, and it gives me the dice rolls. It's defaulted to, 2, but you always pick the first one unless you're doing advantage or disadvantage on the roll. It has my weapons. It's just a one click and it does what it needs to. And then if you need to know about your background, there's a way where, like, I want to know about the favorite enemy. I didn't really read much about it when I created a character. You can click here in this panel and it'll give you a description of what that means. And rather than just explaining it to everybody, what you can do when you're playing is like, hey, I have a favorite enemy. You can click this little chat bubble and it'll put it in the chat for you. So you can see, here it is in the chat. So these are some of the tools that we'll have playing. And it's not going to be very complicated at first. It's all about meeting everyone, deciding what type of character you want to do, and then just asking a question. Can I do something? If we're outside and we hear noise in the background like music, it's like, can we go where that party is? And everyone wants to go, sure. And I'll describe what happens as you go, and maybe you bump into somebody. Or you see, let's say you're walking down an alleyway and you see a door is open a little bit. It's like, can we check that? Maybe you don't want to, but maybe you want to check that slightly open door, in which case I can say, oh, okay, who's going to check it? And the person who wants to check says, well, I'll check it, but what do I need to do? It's like, well, if you want to be careful, let's roll an investigation check. In which case, here we'll go, and I'll run investigation. I get a +1 on investigation, and I rolled a 5. In most cases, I'll say, you don't notice anything out of the ordinary. Now, there might be something back there, but you roll so low, you really don't know what's going on behind that door. If you rolled higher, I might say, you hear something very quiet in the background, like a scraping noise or something. And in which case, you can decide, what do you want next? You want to go in? You want to call into the door? Move on? Don't even bother with the door? All of these are things that you just say what you want to do, and we'll figure out how to get there. And then when we get into combat, it'll go into some sort of turn mode, and we'll deal with that when we get into combat, because it'll just be you have something called initiative here. We roll that. I got a 22. I get a +3 on initiative, so I rolled a 19, and it's actually now a 22. So what it means is the person with the highest initiative goes first, and then it moves down the order. If two people have the same, they can decide how to do it. Sometimes you pick your dexterity. Higher dexterity goes first. But then each person makes decisions down in that initiative order. And when you're done with the first turn, then you start at the top again. So if the 22 is the highest, you start making those decisions, like, I'm going to attack, or I'm going to move away, and things like that. So there'll be a little pop-up box. Let me see, what would that be? So this is the turn order. If I selected everything, I would have been able to just see it here in the turn order. And we'll just go one by one through the turn order with everyone's name, deciding what to do. If someone gets hurt, it's something that comes up a lot. This is swords and sorcery. Things will happen. And you take more damage. This is your health right here, your hit points. Every time you get hit, let's say you take 3 damage. I'll take 3 off of that number. What happens if the next time I take 9 damage? Well, what happens is it goes to 0. It doesn't go below 0. It goes to 0. If for some reason you take a whole lot of damage where it goes all the way to like negative what your full score is, like negative 11 in my case, that's instant death. Rarely happens until you get more advanced and you're fighting dragons and giants and things. But if I took that 9 points of damage, I would reduce this to 0. And the very next time it's my turn, at the end of the turn, you roll what's called a death save. So this is the area right down here. You'll see 3 dots for successes, 3 dots for failures. I've seen people, including a famous person, who on their wrist, they've got 6 bubbles, 3 and 3. And it's kind of a funny thing, I guess, to say, yeah, that's how I track my death saves. But anyway, you click the button to roll. If you score a 10 or higher, you succeed. So you're more than likely going to succeed. But if it's lower than you, then you fail. And what you do is I just failed it, so I'm going to select that bubble. My next turn goes around. All along, while I'm laying unconscious, bleeding out, one of my friends can say, "I'm going to cast a healing spell." As soon as they heal me, I'm back up. If I go up 1 point, I stop the death saves. They get zeroed out, so this will get zeroed out, and now I'm able to get up off the ground, which takes half of my movement. That's one of the rules, and take my turn. If for some reason though nobody helps me, or you can also like force a potion down their mouth, like a healing potion. Let me roll another death save. This one's a success. So when I get all the way to 3 successes first, I stabilize. Nothing's going to happen, but I still need help. If I reach 3 failures, I've died. And there are spells to revivify people. They're successful. Some of them work if you're just died. Others, very, very advanced spells. If you've been turned to ash, it'll actually reconstitute you. And those are the very advanced spells to bring someone back. If for some reason though, there's 2 things in the dice rolls in Dungeons and Dragons, and you're rolling 20. So this is a way to roll dice without ever. I can just click that, or actually I can even do, because it's a chat window. Part of it's hidden by that. You can also just say /roll. There's keyboard commands too. I'm going to roll 1d20. So 1 is how to die. It's it'll roll the dice. If I roll a 1, which is the lowest, or a 20, normally that means something special. So if I am trying to succeed at something and I roll a 1, it's called a natural 1. It's an automatic failure. Even if when you add your bonuses you could have passed, it's an automatic failure because not everything is perfect. If I roll a 20, that's a natural 20, meaning I didn't get an 18 and add 2 to it to get 20. I rolled the 20. That means something special too. So if you're fighting with a weapon, it means that you got a critical hit and you double the damage. You did really well at it. If you're doing death saves, a 1 is an automatic, you take 2 failures. If you get a 20, on the other hand, not only did you succeed, you get 1 hit point back. It's one of those, hey, wait a minute, I'm back up, I'm okay. And if you roll that 20, now you have 1 hit point, and that's the best thing that can happen to you. So I don't know if I have spells yet. I don't think I do, but there are these tabs. You'll stay on this core sheet most of the time. But if you want to see what your spells are, you can click on spells and there'll be spells here. So I haven't gone high enough where I can get spells. And then there's information about, if you cast a spell that does something, there's what's called a DC value. And that's what someone has to beat in order to not be affected by it sometimes. Sometimes it's automatic. You don't have a choice. Sometimes, like I'm trying to put someone to sleep, it may say, okay, here's the DC. They have to roll that or better in order to not be impacted by that spell. And then if I'm casting an attack spell, for example, this one, I get +4 to damage on those attacks. So if there's a magic arrow I'm casting and it does 6 damage on the dice, then it'll automatically add the 4 because the roll 20, when I click these buttons, is doing all those calculations behind the scenes. So I'm going to shoot with the longbow. What it's done behind the scenes, if I highlight a number, it tells me what went into that. I rolled a 6, then it added 3. It's kind of hard to see, but 3 is my dexterity and 2 is my proficiency. That's one thing I didn't go over. As you start with a proficiency bonus here, it is 2. As you go up in levels over time, it might go to 3, then 4. I think it'll go up to 6 if I remember right, or maybe it's 8. But if you're proficient with a bow, you add that proficiency bonus to your ability to attack. If you're not proficient, then you don't get that bonus. And it's the same with these ability scores. If when we said I'm proficient in animal handling, I got the +2. Plus, because animal handling is based on some other score, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it's wisdom. I get a +2 for that too, which makes the 4. So I don't need to worry about, like if I were playing out of the book with friends, I don't have to start adding these numbers in my head all the time. And in fact, that's why D&D Beyond was created. I'll switch to that really quick. So D&D Beyond was created so that if I'm sitting here with friends, I have this either on my computer, but there's also an app on the phone for it. There's an app on the phone for Roll20. So once you create the character, if you're only on your phone and you can't get to a computer, you can just do the Roll20 that way. And I'm not going to create anything here in D&D Beyond. I'll wait till session 0, or if anyone wants to have a one-on-one. If you want to play on my adventure, just go into Fishcord. Let me know. You can even post a comment. I think I'll read them. I'll try to read them this week. This week I want to get everything prepared. And hey, Jason, I see you online. So what I'll do is let me check with Jason, make sure that if he's doing what I want to do, that I won't do it. I'll do something different because he's the one who started this process. And then so I'll get another group going who wants to play. If you have never played before but you're interested, that's no problem at all. It's going to be very straight. It'll be a little bit at a time. It'll all be interactive. If you don't want to show yourself on camera, you don't have to, and so on. So you don't even have to be a YouTuber who streams. You can be just like I was in the beginning. I was a lurker. I turned it on, did my water changes, and then I met people, and then eventually I started getting more interactive and streaming. So yep. So Depths Unknown. So I'm thinking of doing one in Waterdeep, which is the Forgotten Realms as well. I don't know if you're thinking of doing Dragon Heist. That's the one I was thinking of doing, but I'll switch it if that's what you're planning to do. But you can let me know offline if you're trying not to spoil anything. And so the one I'm doing is a very good one for first level. You meet in the city and you get into little adventures in the city, and eventually you start uncovering something, And what I like about the one that I'm running is you can play it 4 different ways. It's designed to have 4 different bad guys. You pick which bad guy at the beginning, and that's how the story will unroll. So if someone has played it before and is thinking, well, I played it before and I played this season, then, well, if you still want to play, I'll pick a different season, and it'll be a different bad guy, different chain of events, but it'll be in the same story. Cool. So Depths Unknown is doing Lost Mine and Phandelver. That's another good beginning one that I've done before as a player. So the one I'm planning to do, I've done as a dungeon master before. Had really good luck with it. There's actually other people who have streamed it. I suggest nobody look at those people who stream their games. And we'll go from there. So if anyone is kind of still on the fence, then you can direct message me in the Fishcord channel. If you're not on the Fishcord channel, you can join that. I think you can find the links on the fishfam.link, or you can send a comment here and I'll send you the link. I don't have it handy right now. But what I'll do is I'll do the one Dragon Heist. There's another campaign after that set in the same area that you can continue on, which some people like, some people don't like, but it's kind of the typical, what people think of Dungeons and Dragons is you're underground and you're fighting creatures and trying to get to the end of this dungeon, this underground setting. Just to talk about some of the other things that are available. So we're playing in one area, Forgotten Realms, where magic is rare, but of course you have characters who are magic users. The one that I was playing before was set in a world called Eberron, where magic's everywhere. And so there's actually a class of character there called an artificer that they allow to be used other places, and I'll allow it here too. And this is someone who's like a magical version of a smith, like a blacksmith. And you can create magic items and you can do other things. So if there's anything in that you're thinking of as a type of character, we can talk about it and then figure out what best fits as far as the race and class and how you want to start out. And then also the other thing is as you're playing, like for example, there are people who pick a fighter, like they get tired of it. They see people casting spells, they want to cast spells. You can there's something called multi-class. You can decide at some point, it's like, okay, I've made it through 3 different levels of fighter, but I want to be a warlock. Well, instead of becoming your next level of fighter, which is level 4, you can say, I'm going to multi-class and be a warlock. So now you have all of your fighter skills you keep, but now you can start growing as a warlock and start beginning to cast spells. And now you have the best of both worlds going forward. And then you can multi-class again. I also want to be a druid. I want to gain these natural magic skills as well as the warlock and the fighter. People do that all the time. At some point, though, you dilute it out a little bit and you miss something. One thing I'm doing in my current campaign as a character is I'm going all the way through as a fighter just to see what happens when you hit level 20. Level 20, you're the best you can be when you're in the city streets. Everyone recognizes you because you're that person, right? You have the skill sets that have grown in one area so far that you do unbelievable things. Like in 6 seconds, you shoot the bow 5 times. That's kind of unheard of. When you start and you're fighting, you get 1 hit. That's it. In 6 seconds, if you want to hit someone, you hit once, cast 1 spell. Some magic users have a way of splitting their spells, and they can cast 1 spell at 2 people, for example. There's all sorts of things in here, but as you talk about what you want to do, I'll help guide you there, and the Dungeon Master will do that in whichever campaign you're doing. This is all about having fun. So I see Father Fish just came online. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. If you're interested in playing on my campaign, I still have room. I'm less than half full. And if you're new, that's okay too. So anyway, thanks everyone. Hope to hear from you. And I'm planning on playing Tuesday nights, 7 to 9 Eastern. If there's a reason that maybe it's too early for you, but you like the day, let me know too. I could always move it a bit. And then not this week, but next week I'll plan to run a session 0 so we can figure everything out. And then maybe the week after that, I'll have everything prepared where we can just start off. Everyone will have their characters. And even if you've never played before, I'll be describing the situation and you can just tell me what you want to do. And I'll tell you what dice to roll. There's no need to memorize anything. So anyway, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.